Good morning. As we return to Mark this morning, I'll give a kind of a caveat or disclaimer on the front end. I am the least eschatologically astute man you know. When it comes to end times prophecy, the events of end times, the content of Revelation, I'm not nearly as well versed on this as others are, and it's not a cop out, but at least for me, the reason is because there is so much interpretive speculation and so little anchored orthodoxy in eschatology, or the study of end times. Eschatology, simply the study of end times, that I really struggle, because where I really discipline myself to focus is stay anchored in orthodoxy. Don't stray from orthodoxy. If it doesn't self-interpret, if it's not consistent with the whole of the Word of God, then it doesn't bind itself to my theology. I have to stay within in documentable orthodoxy, and I can't get there personally. I can't get there in eschatology. There's just so much that requires interpretive speculation. So having said that, even though we're going to step into some eschatology today, I recognize that for all of us there may be different interpretive understandings, and if we differ on some of these things, show each other, and for crying out loud, show me a little bit of grace. And maybe I'm not on board with you on that, but I'm not 100% certain any of us are. So with that kind of caveat, we're going to be in Mark, and we're really going to be looking at all of Mark 13, but we need some context too. I didn't go looking for this week. Actually, I was looking for, strangely, because of connection upon connection upon connection, a song that was a really old song that I heard a long time ago, and I hadn't heard it, and I had read this article about this controversy over this song, and said, oh yeah, I remember that song, and I really liked that, but I don't know anybody else that liked it, so I need to go find that song. So I went on YouTube to look it up, and the first hit that came up on YouTube when I opened YouTube was a sermon by John MacArthur. Do we know who John MacArthur is? Yeah, John MacArthur. Speaking of orthodoxy, there's a guy that hangs really tight to orthodoxy, and the name of that sermon was What's Happening That People Cannot See. John MacArthur sermon, and it's really recent. It was from October 22nd this year, so it's really recent. And so for me personally, I'm looking for a stupid song, but I was totally captivated by that title, and so I quit looking for that song and I listened to this sermon. And John's focus was, his point of the sermon was well defined, but his focus for 90% of everything he had to say was centralized on kind of one evidence of what his point was. And when you get to the end of his sermon, which is uncharacteristic of John, you have to kind of start putting things together before you really understand what his point is, because John's usually pretty point blank in what he has to say. And in his sermon titled, What's Happening That People Can't See Anymore, he spent 90% of his time talking about wealth and prominence and power and influence and position and what a distraction that can be. But when you get to the end, you understand in the kind of the breadth of what he had to say, that what's happening that people can't see anymore is literally a love for the things of this world. That is the distraction that shields and scales the eyes of people from seeing what's really happening in this world. To Jock's note, he's paying attention to what's going on in Israel, and then he's also paying attention to what's going on in everywhere outside of Israel. And that demonstrates that John is paying attention to the breadth of what's happening, not just the events of what happens. And that's what, to the best of my discernment, and I think the best of Jesus' self-revelation, he's asking all of us to do. is never lose sight of context. Look at the big picture. Don't get too mired in the details of events, because the big picture, or the breadth, you need to be watchful, diligent of. So when John takes his sermon and he says, why is it that people can't see what's right in front of them? Here's my challenge to me. I'll offer it as a challenge to you. You know. It may even be seated at the level of conviction in your life that you are to seek the kingdom of God first, and all things will be added unto you. You know that the things of this world offer largely distractions from truth. That the ways and means of this world have their own passions, their own direction, their own focus, and yet we still seem to gravitate to that. We have a hard time letting loose of the things of the world. So I'll ask you, because I think Jesus asked this same question here in a few minutes. Even though you know this, do you look out into the world with some measure of despair at the state of fallenness? And I think every one of us could say, yeah, to some degree, one way or another. Some of us may be more passionate than others, but in one way or another, we can look into the world and be cognizant of or overwhelmed with despair on the nature of fallenness. But maybe the more difficult question is, can you look in the mirror with that same critical eye? Can you really look in the mirror and say, apart from the salvation of Christ, that same despair that I witness in the rest of the world is right here. It's in the man looking back in the mirror at me. And that's personally what leads me to such an overwhelming state of gratitude. That God communicated with me in a way that I can understand that he has come for me, he will never leave me, and he's coming back for me. And there's a huge gratitude in my life that comes from that. But it's hard to look in the mirror and see what Jesus sees when he looks at me. It's hard to see that. So when we get to the temple, it's now, and I'm just going to make sure that I get this right because I get these things wrong pretty easily. It's Tuesday. Last week we were Sunday into Monday. Holy Week, as we refer to it, they don't. Holy Week has begun, and it's Tuesday, and they go into the temple, and there's a lot of teaching that's going on throughout the course of the day Tuesday, and I'm not going into a whole lot of it, but there's the parable of the vineyard, and then of course the gnashing of the teeth by the Pharisees because they're really upset about this because they're pretty confident that Jesus was speaking about them. There's the question of authority again. I mean, can we just get past this question of authority? But again, he's being questioned with his authority. The Herodians step forward and they ask a moral question. This came up in a discussion that I had earlier this week where it was an article written by a guy that said something about the moral cause of burning fossil fuel. And so I read the article, but I couldn't get past that first sentence. Is it morally right to burn fossil fuels? And you should know this. If you don't think this way, you should be thinking this way. Anytime a moral law is invoked, before you go any further, you need to confirm with the person invoking the moral law the source of the lawgiver. By what authority does that moral law have value? So before you go on to say, I was in a seminar many years ago on when this kind of whole green building thing came forward, it was over in the W.T. Young Library, and there was all these architects assembled, and these talking heads up there trying to promote this kind of new vision for our profession that you're accountable. You're the captain of the ship when it comes to saving the planet because you're the ones that designed the built environment. And what you're doing is killing this planet. So you've got to change what you do. And they tried to invoke this moral right. And so I had asked the question then, define what is right. How do you define right? What is right? what method or morality or moray or law do you anchor doing what is right? Because that was the answer to the question. Why should we do this? Because it's the right thing to do. Well, you're invoking a moral law. So what's the absolute or the anchor on which the moral law is based? Well, it went nowhere, which I suspected. It didn't make any difference. And honestly, at that point, I wasn't prepared to go any further with it either. But always, whenever a moral law or a moral right or what is just or true or right is a moral issue is right, find out what the anchorage, what the lawgiver that establishes that moral, because you will do the same thing, but you have an answer. It's the highest governing authority of all existence. You want to know the lawgiver? The lawgiver is the author of your soul. I can't get any higher on the moral accountability than the author of my soul. So if the author of my soul says there's a hell to be gained, or a hell to be shunned, and a heaven to be gained, and there's a right and a wrong, and a just and an unjust, there's the sacred and the profane, I have no choice at all but to set aside whatever opinion I may have and subscribe. Because if I don't, I'm in the position of rebellion. So the Herodians step forward and they ask a moral question. Is it right to pay taxes unto Caesar? Well, Jesus says, well, give me a coin. Whose mark is on this coin? And then render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and render God unto God. He could have just ended the question with render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but he didn't. He added also, render unto God what is God. Clearly what Jesus is saying is, Caesar's mark is on the mammon, Caesar's mark is on the coin, Caesar's mark is on the will. You all value this. That's why you're asking the question. Give it to him. It's just gold. In the joke, it's just pavement where I come from. It's just gold. But don't stop there. Render unto God's what is God. What he's clearly saying is that Caesar's mark is on the coin. Whose mark is upon you? If the mark of your Savior is truly on you, if the mark of your Creator is truly upon you, then this is not a question. The Herodians came forward with a trap. Who are the Herodians? They're the least known of all the guys that we talked to. The Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Herodians. The Herodians are the least known. These are the guys that walk the fine line between just enough allegiance to Herod to be able to maintain a position of authority, because they think that the occupation of Israel is a whole new world that we're going to be living in, and we will never go back to the old Israel. But then just enough allegiance to the law of God to maintain their position and control over the people. So they walk this really fine line. The Sadducees and the Pharisees say that the Herodians are traitors, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and we're all allied against Jesus, so we can all get on the same side. And so the Herodians are in here asking Jesus this moral question without any moral anchorage. Jesus unsettles them. The day goes on, but we get all the way to the end of the day. Now it's late in the day. They're leaving the temple courts at this point. And he's got the 12, and they've been deep into a lot of other stuff, which we're just not, we can't go into right now. But here's where I do want to focus. We're leaving the temple. And the disciples turn around and say, Jesus, you should see this. Look. Let me just read it. 13, verse 1. As he was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Do you see all these great buildings? Jesus replied, Not one stone will be left upon another. Every one will be thrown down. I'm an architect. Late day light is the great light for architecture. The shadows are crisp, especially in the spring or in the fall. Fall best. If you run around with the camera right now, you can look outside right now and you can see the sharpness of shadows and the brilliance of colors and the clarity of the sky. This is all great for photography. This is all great to see the dynamic detail of buildings, which I get into and you may not. But I think it was Kevin Costner who said in the film Dances with Wolves that when you direct the film, you get to give yourself the best light. If you saw the film, he was always in this really great dramatic light. But so they're enamored by the buildings. They're enamored by not just the buildings, but what they represent. This is the temple. These are the temple courts. Look at this. This is magnificent. And Jesus says, it's not going to stand. That the time's coming when not one stone is going to be left upon another. It's all coming down. Now that's Jesus' first foray into where they're headed here in terms of eschatology. Is that this doesn't stand. And I'm going to go really to maybe, I'll ask you this. In terms of of end times, the book of Revelation, the events that are described in the book of Revelations, the prophecy about the events from Matthew 24 and from here in Mark 13. Do you get in any conversation? Have you ever been in conversations about this before? Yes, what's the most oft question asked about the end of times when you're in a conversation? When? Yeah. When? That it's always the topic. Not only is it the topic of conversation and the question being asked, often it's the subject of argument. It's like, we have really specific ideas about this. Jesus said, if I can get to the right place here, no one's going to know about the day or the hour, not the angels in heavens nor the Son, but only the Father. The one question that we seem so focused on, when's this going to happen, is the one question that Jesus addresses all the way at the end of this exchange to say, you're on a fool's errand. No one knows. And just to cover this base quickly, and then we're going to head back up to the front end. For a long time, this rubbed me the wrong way. I am of the very distinct position that Jesus is omniscient. That the differentiation between Jesus and Yahweh is zero. It is absolutely nothing. That there is nothing that is of God that is not of Christ, and nothing that is of Christ that is not of God. And yet Jesus himself says, even the Son of Man, even I, don't know the time of my return. And I was like, yeah, that's troubling on my theology. I'm struggling with that. This is where I have to now stretch into speculation in eschatology. I believe what Jesus is saying there, it has less to do with what he does or doesn't know, and more to do with where information like that exists. That's a matter of heaven. That's not a matter of earth. That's a matter of the divine. That's not something to be juggled by the minds of men. Now, that's my opinion. You can come to your own conclusions about what you think. But what you're asking for is eternal knowledge from the position of finite man. That's a matter of heaven. That's not a matter of man. That's how I resolve that. You can resolve it or leave it unresolved in any way you choose. But that's for me. So I made a little list of potential questions that weren't asked, that could have been asked, that sometimes maybe I asked. The big question on the table is, when is this going to happen? Do you see all these great buildings? Jesus replied, not one of the stone will be left upon another, and every one will be thrown down. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, and John and Andrew asked him privately, tell us when these things will happen, and what will be the sign that they're about to be fulfilled. So the question they ask is, when? When is this going to happen? Now, honestly, I think that's not a horribly bad start, because the one of the questions that could have been asked is, really? This is really going to happen? It's a question of doubt. I just pointed out the most extraordinary thing. The temple of Yahweh, in its late day light, in its glory, its Passover time. This is so well revered that thousands upon thousands upon thousands have flocked from all over to come here to worship God. Aren't we supposed to be impressed by this? And you're telling us that it's all coming down. Really? So one of the questions they could ask is that really true? Is that really going to happen? One of the questions they could ask is, what's going to happen? If all of this is coming down, then what does that mean? What's going to happen? One of the questions they could ask is how will this happen? By what means? Because remember, those guys just within days before were saying, hey, when glory happens and we set up the kingdom of David and we run Rome out on its heels and we're in control now. John and my brother James here, we want to sit on your right and your left. They're already planning for the the legislative and executive operation of the new liberated Israel under its own control without Rome's influence. They're already planning how this is getting set up. And so you might ask, how's this going to happen? Because that's not, for them, that's troubling on my theology. How's this going to happen? I've got a question that I'm asking, and it's kind of how I begin to approach this morning, and that is why? Why is this going to happen? Why would you undermine the temple of God? Why would you tell us that it's all going to be torn down? Does that question cross your mind? Do you say, in the big picture, why does there have to be a book of Revelation? Why does there have to be wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in diverse places and famines and destruction and Satan emerge into the world of men in a deceptive and a powerful way, and that a third of this and 2/3 of that, and the fish of the sea and the fruit of the land be destroyed, and all of this, and the stars come, dim and die from the heaven, the moon will not show its light, the sun will not. Why? Why does this all have to happen? I thought we were talking about kingdom building here. Why do we have to do all this? Why am I going to be persecuted and thrown into jail? And most of us die as martyrs. That's what you're telling us. That's what you're telling us this is going to be. That's not what we had in mind. When we signed up on the Jesus wagon, we're headed to this kingdom that you're talking about. And we had a picture of the kingdom that doesn't look anything like what you're describing. So if I'm asking a question today, I'm not asking when, I'm not asking how, I'm not asking is it true. I'm asking why. Why does this all have to happen? And I think Isaiah checks in on this. Isaiah 13, starting at verse 9. See, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel day with wrath and fierce anger. Makes the land desolate and destroys the sinners within it. And the stars of the heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. This is all language that Jesus is going to tell them here in a few minutes. I will punish the world for its evil, for their wicked sins. You want to know why? Because God will not contend with man forever. That there will be an end to this unreconciled, unbridled wickedness. There will, if we allow Matthew to contribute into Mark's content here, Matthew will tell us that in this time when all of these things are happening, which we're going to go into in just a minute, one thing really just chills me, and he says, the love of man will grow cold. If you allow that one to sink in for a minute, you may have seen a little bit of what that looks like. Remember, the absence of love is not hate. The absence of love is apathy. I simply don't care. When the love of man grows so cold that we just don't even care anymore, I think that's really close to what Jesus is talking about. Not too long back, I was at a funeral. And we went through the funeral service, and then we all left there, and we went to the gravesite, and the officiant stood before everybody who went to the gravesite, and he offered this, and this is a quote. He says, I'm not a religious man, and neither is this. So I really don't have anything to say here, but thank you for coming. Now to me, that was chilling. It was a bit breathtaking. But the mother of the deceased was sitting right there with no reaction at all. When we get to a point in our lives where not even the mother that is bearing her child doesn't even desire a hope for mercy, desire a hope for peace, desire the grace of someone somewhere to bring comfort to my child in death. I think you're getting really kind of close to that kind of idea that Jesus is talking about. when the most sensitive amongst us, our mothers, don't even care about the eternal estate of our children. The love of man is growing cold. The world has a little bit less light in it. It's a little dim. To use a poet's language, that do we not have to light candles in daylight hours? The darkness has come upon us so deep. So when I listen to John MacArthur, why is it, what's happened that people don't see anymore? We have fallen so in love with the world that we have allowed the world to blind us. And to use Jesus' words, if the days of deception were not cut short, even the very elect would be deceived. So I'm going to read a passage here, but I'm going to highlight some words really quick before we do. Watch, be on your guard, do not worry, stand firm until the end. Understand, pray, and then lastly, I have told you everything ahead of time. That's my little underlined, really poorly formed sentence summary of what Jesus had to say when they said, "When is this going to happen? When will this happen?" I'm still asking why, and I know why. Because I destroyed all life on earth when I had the flood. Everything goes now, and I redeem my own. This is why that last question of Satan in that so-called temptation of Christ is so goofy. Bow down and worship me, and I'll give you dominion over all the... I didn't come to rule them in this world. I came to redeem them out of this world. Jim may know best. There's a huge difference between reformation and reconciliation, or redemption. I didn't come here to reconcile these or reform these people. I came to redeem these people. My suspicion is that there's a whole lot of claimed reformants that become repeat offenders that land right back in an incarceration. There's a whole lot fewer that leave incarceration as redeemed and never come back. I suspect that may be, to some degree, a testimony that you've witnessed. That those who leave incarceration redeemed are changed forever. They don't come back. Those who claim reformation, I got a pretty good chance of seeing them back here. Jesus didn't come to rule us in this world. He came to take command of us, to redeem us out of this world. When he looks at the temple, what he sees is ruin. Because what must happen is everything that this temple represents, religion, has got to die. Such that a redeemed life can live. Because fallen man, looking through fallen eyes, has bought religion as a fake, a saccharine substitute for the indwelt, spirit-led, redeemed life that Christ came to offer. Not when has this happened, but why is this happening? Why? Because this world is not to be reformed. This world is to be redeemed. And I am in the process of redeeming my creation. So, watch, be on your guard, do not worry, stand firm, understand, pray, and I've told you everything ahead of time. Let's hear Jesus' response. Watch out that no one deceives you, because many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and will deceive many. I'm sorry, I've started at verse 5. Forgive me, I get kind of wrapped up on my adrenaline rush here, and I forget to tell you. We're starting at chapter 13, verse 5 in Mark. Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming that I am he, and he will deceive many. When you hear wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, and the end is still to come. Now nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be earthquakes in various places, and famines. And these are the beginning birthing pains. Now you must be on your guard and be handed over to the local councils and flogged in synagogues. On account of me, you will stand before governors and kings and witness to them. And the gospel must be preached to all the nations, wherever you are arrested and brought to trial. So do not worry beforehand about what to say. Just say whatever is given to you at the time, for it is not you who is speaking, but the Holy Spirit. And brother will betray brother to death, and father his child. Children will rebel against their parents, have them put to death. All men will hate you because of me, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And when you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down and enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for the pregnant women and nursing mothers. Now pray that this will not take place in winter, because those days will be in distress, unequaled from the beginning of time, when God created the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If the Lord had not cut those days short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. At that time, anyone who says, "Look, here's the Christ," or "Look, there he is," do not believe it. For the false Christ and false prophets will appear and perform signs and miracles to deceive the elect, if it were possible. So be on your guard. I have told you everything ahead of time. Jesus is letting you know, if you approach your life with earthly eyes, you will never see this coming. You'll buy it. Even the very elect would be subject to deception if Jesus had not cut these days short. If we look at this and say, "Wow, this is a really high standard," can anybody live like this? Not apart from the Spirit, not apart from redemption. Not if we think that we're doing our religious duty by showing up on a Sunday morning, or hanging out with Christian friends, or having associations with religious people. No, Jesus isn't talking to any of them. In fact, he gets really pointed when he gets down to verse, I think, 14. When you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong. This was a puzzler to me for a minute, but I think I get it now. Let the reader understand. And my first thought was, well, he's talking about me and you and all these people 70 plus years after this happens, after this is all written down and the written word of God starts to be distributed. Let the reader understand. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about them, then, there. You're the reader. Where does that language come from? Daniel 9. That's where the abomination that causes desolation stands in the temple. That's where the most profane of sacrifices and a mockery of sacrifice takes place. The reader that he's talking about is you, the reader of Daniel. Them, then, there. If you don't recognize this, read this. Become biblically literate. Know the prophecy that defines the future that will come. Don't be so focused on the when. Be focused on the why. Because when you see that, everybody's going to, this is worth making note of. Everybody's going to see the wars. Everybody's going to see hear the rumors of wars. Everybody's going to see the earthquakes and famines in diverse places and the shaking of the firmament. And quite frankly, he's going to talk here in a moment. After these times, then there's more. The sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will fall from the heavens. Everybody's going to see that. But I guarantee you, out there in the future somewhere, be it tomorrow, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, you're going to dial in on CNN and they're going to say, well, see, that's just global warming. That's what's happened here. What we're seeing here is earthquakes and famines and for crying out loud, global warming is so bad the sun didn't even show us light anymore. There's going to be a scientific or a philosophical or an agenda-based reason why all of these things happen. But what is God telling you? What is Jesus telling you? Oh no, these are birthing pains. The world will not see the birthing pains. The world will have its own answers for why these things are happening. Because the world sees with the world's eyes. I'm calling you to see with the eyes that I give you. The eyes empowered by the Spirit. Not to see just the events, like Jock explained earlier. Not to just see what's happening in Israel, but what's happening all around the world. Is what's happening here significant because of the climate that it's creating all over the world. Be aware. Thank you. Be aware. Don't get caught up in, know the details, but don't get caught up in the details. Look broader. Look with spiritual eyes. And, from my perspective, I'm sitting here listening to all this as a disciple sitting on the Mount of Olives with Jesus just after I was so excited about those buildings over there. And Jesus is telling me all this. And then he says, but in those days following that distress, there's more. It gets worse. Most eschatologists, I'm on that kind of speculative range. Most eschatologists say, well, this is the break between the first 3.5 years and the second 3.5 years. This is where the tribulation turns into the Great Tribulation. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you on that. I'm not focused on the timing. I'm focused on the why. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and heavenly bodies will be shaken. Now, if you're one of the disciples, you should perk up on that. That's direct from Isaiah, literally direct from Isaiah. And the context of Isaiah's comments are parenthetically defined as what will immediately happen to nations warring against Israel, but what is to happen in the future to the nations of the world warring against Israel. I told you I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to do this because I just didn't. I don't. It's part of the reason why I'm going to explain why I don't get into this too much. The stars will be fallen from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. There's one line of thought there that says that the celestial bodies that we see when we look up in the sky, the stars and planets and I guess there's lots of classifications for all the celestial forms that we see, that they're going to be no more. They're going to implode, or they will lose their orbit. That the physics of creation that God created that governs the universe is going to begin to break down. And where the pole star is, the North Star is, that you used to guide yourself by, it's not going to be there anymore. It's going to be somewhere else. Where Saturn Big Dipper is not even going to be a dipper anymore. It's going to have a hole in it. And they're just that when you look up into the sky, everything that you counted on, everything that you understood, everything that seems stable to you is going to start to break down. The stars are going to fall from the sky. There's another thought that says, no, we're not. We're talking about something far more spiritual. Something akin to what's discussed in Revelation. That when John the Revelator talks about the stars falling from the sky, he's talking about that the reign of evil will descend upon the earth. But the stars of the heavens that fall to the ground are the agents of Satan that have been unleashed upon the earth. And so whichever side of that, or there may be a third, I don't know, whichever side of that you fall on, we're talking about some a season that has never been and never will be from the benchmark of Jesus telling him that. This will be unparalleled throughout all of existence. I'm going to get out of that because again we're in this. So learn this lesson from the fig tree. Is that you get this one. We're agrarian people. We harvest figs all the time. You know what it's like when figs are coming into season, when it's ready to come, and what season that is, and so if you can see that with your earthly eyes, I'm asking you to see this with your spiritual eyes. In fact, I'm not saying I'm asking you. I'm telling you that if when you see a fig tree come into its fruit. You have an absolute certainty about what's going to happen. I need you to, I'm calling you, I'm commanding you to see this the same way. When you see these things, you must know that this is about to happen. I'm not telling you the time. Nobody knows the time. You're not even made of the fabric to know the time or understand the time. But you can't understand the season. In the same way you understand the season of figs, you can understand the season of this. So be forewarned. So we get down to the end of this, and he says, be on your guard, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It's like a man going away, and he leaves his house, and he puts his servants in charge, and each of his assigned tasks, and he tells the one at the door to keep watch. I mean, he couldn't be more clear about what he's talking about here. He's been telling them I'm going away for a long time. Remember when we are? They don't know this, but we know this. This is Tuesday. Thursday night's Passover. Friday morning's trial. Death on the cross. I mean, all that's coming. I'm going away, but I'm coming back. I got to pop back. In verse 26, at that time you will see the Son of Man coming on clouds with great power and glory. That's where he tells him he's coming back. Do y'all remember that language? The language that he says, at that time men will see the Son of Man coming on clouds with great power and glory. Do you remember that language? It hadn't happened yet chronologically here. It's about to happen chronologically here. But do you remember us talking about that language? That's when Jesus is standing in front of Caiaphas, and Caiaphas says, "Tell us the truth. Are you the son, the blessed one?" And he says, "It is as you say." And he says, "And you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds in glory." I am the Messiah. I am your judge, and I'm coming back. That's the language that he gives Caiaphas when he asks, "Are you the Messiah?" Jesus is preempting at this point. This is Daniel language. This comes straight from Daniel. Your biblical literacy is critically important to you understanding, knowing with certainty, not opinions about what's about to come, but equipping you to literally see the truth about what is happening when it comes. So keep watch, because you don't know the hour the house will come. The owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or midnight or when the rooster crows at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. And I say to you, what I say to everyone, watch. Be diligent. Stand strong. I mean, I'll go back through that little summary sequence. Watch, be on your guard, don't worry, stand firm, understand, pray, because he's told me everything ahead of time. We are completely without excuse. When he says, do not let him find you sleeping, he's not talking about your unconscious state. He's talking about spiritual apathy. You are in no way equipped to even see, much less defend yourself, much less survive through the times that are coming. Spiritually apathetic. It's time to set aside every facet of the love that we have for the things of this world and truly heed Christ's counsel, command of us to seek first his kingdom. Because if we are so attached to the things of this world that we can't let go, then the world is all we will ever have. We got to close. Thoughts before we close? Yes. Dalton, can you close us in prayer this morning?